Hello! For today's video, I have 3 fun little DIY projects, all incorporating pins, buttons, patches, and beading. Very quick, simple, DIY friendly. So without further ado, let's get into it. For our first clothing upcycle / DIY project, we have this plain black tie. I got the idea originally from a fashion designer, but I obviously didn't want to completely copy their idea, so I just pulled some inspiration from that and I just experimented with materials that I already had and also some beads that I picked up from the craft store. But as you saw on the thumbnail and also from the inspo picture, today we are creating sort of a pierced tie. To create this project, you obviously need a tie, but you also need some safety pins, beads, chains, and for tools you will need scissors, pliers, and wire cutters. To start, I am decorating some of the safety pins with beads and then I am placing them on one larger safety pin. Since I wanted to use up a lot of materials that I already had, I only actually had one of those large safety pins, so I decided to kind of use that as a centerpiece / focal point for the tie. To decorate the larger safety pin, I alternated between plain safety pins and beaded ones, and I also alternated between the colors and textures that I chose. I did want some sense of pattern, but ultimately I did want the tie to have a organic feel and not feel too planned out and methodical, so I did alternate between silvers and blues toward the end. I pulled inspiration from the original tie design by choosing beads that sort of had a metallic, geode, almost gem-like quality to them, and I also went with a pop of color with the blue. When I finished that particular safety pin area, I decided to build kind of off of that and move upward on the tie and then also to the sides around it. As you can see, I am struggling with the tie and the material a little bit here, and I did get myself a couple times and I did hurt myself, so just be careful when you're doing this project. Aside from that though, this process was incredibly easy and fluid and I had a really easy time with it. It is even easier than threading beads onto necklaces. I enjoyed this part of the process of adding little things here and there and deciding to add a little bit more, take a little bit away. I enjoyed finding that balance overall. So take your time, find your flow and your rhythm, and even when you think it might not be coming together, just kind of trust that it will, because eventually it all sort of falls into place. But next I decided to work with some chain material because I wanted to add just a little bit more variety to the tie and overall look. You obviously have the option to hand sew things, and that might be better for long-term wear, but I decided to make the chains sort of detachable by threading them through a safety pin and then hooking them on the back of the tie. I wanted the option to be able to remove things and change things around easily if I wanted to, so that's why I went about it the way that I did, but sewing things on is also completely, a good option as well. I added a few more safety pins on the side for some extra stability, and I also beaded those as well. I really like those black iridescent ones I chose, and I really do think they mimic piercings very well. Once I finished up that chain section, I felt like I had nice balance on the top part, so I then decided to work below the bigger safety pin charm. I continued working with the chain and I did make some adjustments to this later, but I initially started by measuring out with the width of the tie. I repeated the same process here using safety pins to connect the chain to the tie. And once I finished that, I continued playing around with other safety pins and just laying them out, arranging them in different ways to get an idea of how I wanted to progress forward with the design. I decided I wanted to create sort of a chained look with the safety pins going across the tie, so I just very simply hooked them all together and then connected them to the tie. I liked that concept, but I felt it was lacking a little bit, so then I decided to add some beads to that area as well. I took some of this thinner chain and also various beads and I created a little pin again and sort of arranged that in the negative space between the top chain and the safety pin chain. I decided on this because I had a lot of kind of harsh horizontal lines going on in the tie and I wanted something more vertical to draw the eye up and down. And I did really like how that looked and it was starting to come together more for me, but I did decide to trim some of that chain down because I thought it looked a little bit too heavy and messy in that area and it needed more negative space. As I mentioned earlier, I did add some beads to this chain sort of thing going on here and I think it's so fun. I love the sparkle and colors. There wasn't a whole lot of rhyme or reason to what I was doing. I just placed things where it felt right and I was pretty random about it, but I did, try to achieve balance overall. And then once I finished that spot, I continued working lower. I laid some pins out as I did before just to get an idea of where I wanted to place the next ones, and I decided on going with a set of 3. Once I decided where I liked the placement, I then began securing each safety pin to the tie. I made sure to leave extra space to add beads later. And similar to how I did before, I didn't really function off of a specific pattern. I just tried to balance it the best that I could, alternating between bigger, larger beads and the tiny, daintier ones. I filled up the pins just enough, but left a little slice of room to then connect it to the tie enough to secure it closed. I continued working on each pin until I finished, and then I began to focus my efforts on the bottom of the tie, and here I wanted to create a heavier piece, a bigger sense of drama. I played around with the idea of that giant safety pin sort of keychain thing I made at the top, but instead I kind of just went crazy with the safety pins and created almost like a grid. First, I connected a base sort of pin, and then I continued layering them on similarly to how I made the giant pin at the top, but then I just made it as cluttered as I could get it and then added a few horizontal pins to secure it all together. I wanted that visual clutter, but I didn't want the pins to go flying everywhere, so that is how I was able to keep them still. And then I noticed it was still a little bit bare at the bottom, so I just worked on some final touches and filling in that empty space. And here is the final result. I think it turned out very, very cute. I do think eventually I could develop it even more and add some more to it, but for now I think it's a good starting point, and I think it turned out good considering I didn't, really know what I was doing. I kind of was just freehanding it and trying things out. I might go in and touch up some spots where I kind of folded the tie over just to smooth out some of those lines and wrinkles a little bit. But all around, I think the inspo came through, but I still put my unique spin on it and I'm pleased with the results. When the chains and beads catch the light, it looks really, really pretty and reflects in a really nice way. And all around, I'm excited to play around with it and style it and see what I can come up with. Before it was a plain black tie, and now it's something really fun and special. Our next project is this black sweater vest, which as you can see I already started to do some work on because when I originally thrifted it, I did not notice that it had like 1 million holes all over it, so I had to make do. I've had it for a while, but as a quick temporary fix, I just slapped a bunch of safety pins on most of the holes that I could identify at the time. But since then, I decided I wanted to elaborate a little bit on the design and make it a little bit prettier. My overall approach was very similar to the tie, but to start for this project, I went forward with just identifying more holes, looking visually where those biggest spots were, and adding more pins to that to fill it out. Once I sort of filled out those areas, I then went in with beads and began decorating more of the safety pins to add some more texture and sparkle and color to the look. I still had a lot of beads left over from the tie, so I just continued working with those, and since they were the same beads, I decided to kind of consider them as a set, and I kept them in mind with each other in terms of future styling. It kind of goes without saying, but I'm using the same tools here, same process here, but I also recommend having a container for your beads because those go loose and wild all over the place very quickly. Similarly to the tie, I just kind of eyed things out. I took my time. I decided where things needed balance. I decided where to take things away, where to add things. In terms of where I put the clusters of safety pins, that was entirely decided by the natural holes that were already in the garment. And since I had a larger surface area, I wasn't going to be decorating the entire sweater vest, so I really focused on those areas, making them as detailed and as pretty as possible. I would often move the sweater, adjust it, tug on it gently just to make sure that everything was secure and good throughout the process. And as you can see, I just continued forward with the same process as I was doing. Also, by the way, I would recommend hand washing or spot cleaning these particular pieces. I did run out of storage, so I wasn't able to film the entirety of the back, but the process was exactly the same, so I didn't want to repeat too much footage anyhow. I sort of went for a little bit of asymmetry, and in the back I went a little bit more chaotic, a little bit more heavy with the safety pins. But all in all, just like the black tie, it was a pretty plain garment before, and it looks a lot more jazzed up now, a lot more visually interesting. Again, I could see myself building onto this even more in the future, but I would like to get a more variety of different pins and stuff to incorporate different sizes, different beads, that sort of thing. But I think this turned out very cute. I'm really excited to wear this and style this as well, and it's just more exciting than it was before. And of course, I can always take the pins out and redo it, change my mind, mix it up if I feel like it later on. But I'm pleased with this project as well, a fairly cheap, easy, inexpensive DIY. And I mentioned earlier that I created them as sort of a set, at least in the process of making them, so I wanted to style them together as well. I do think it really works as a set. I think they match very well, actually, and I really like this outfit. I think it's very cute. I like the punky, preppy sort of look. I wasn't sure how much I would actually style the two pieces together, but I really do like how this looks. All around, I would say two successes. We now have our final project for this video, and we are decorating this little messenger sort of style bag that I thrifted a while ago, and it's perfect because it already has a bunch of pinholes in it, so it was sort of made for this project, I think. I gathered a bunch of pins and patches that I already had and just decided to work with those. Just like the process with everything else, I laid things out first before I committed to piercing the bag and permanently placing things. So I laid everything out, I moved things around, and I took my time with each piece, managing them one by one, organizing things differently to see how I liked it, trying to achieve a nice balance. I find that it's helpful to work in little clusters and groups to kind of better organize all the moving parts. I start off kind of building little frames and then I end up Tetrising other things together. It's sort of like completing a puzzle. Sometimes you have to rotate things, move things, sometimes you have to step back and look differently at it. All around, I decided that I wanted some color and fun and boldness to the bag, but I didn't want it to be overrun with color, and so I ended up deciding on a sort of color scheme. I also didn't want to overcrowd the bag right away, so I decided again to work in little clusters, framing the top portion of the bag and also the left and right side of it. I continued working things around until I felt satisfied, and ultimately I left the middle empty just for more room to play around in the future if I want to. Once I finally decided on my final placement, I then began working on securing everything to the bag. So I started with the pins first because that would be the easiest. This part is obviously pretty self-explanatory. You just put the pins in the bag. You can line it up before you actually press the pin into it to help you get a better idea of where it will actually go once the pin is inside. In order to get the pins in this part, I had to zip open the pocket and then I lifted it from the inside and pressed the pin through. As I mentioned, working in groups helps, and I tend to rely on the number 3 a lot because I do like symmetry and balance for the most part. So the way that I kind of organized everything was by creating that centerpiece in the middle and organizing 3 pins there, and then creating a little patch on the left and organizing 3 things there, and then also doing that on the right side. Once I finished securing all of the pins, I then moved forward with working on the patches. Honestly, I didn't feel like sewing them in out of laziness, and I really thought it would be difficult, to be honest, with the texture and the fabric, so I decided to do sort of a makeshift pin attachment situation with a hot glue gun. Overall, it was very simple and easy. I took these little pin attachment things that I got at the craft store, and then I took the hot glue gun and I did just a strip on the top, a strip on the bottom, and then I pressed the attachments into the glue. I just held each piece in until it was secure, and then I let it dry properly before I went and attached it to the bag. But this is a really easy way to turn pretty much any lightweight object or piece into a pin that you can then attach to other things. And I like that I don't have to commit to sewing certain patches then onto other pieces. I can mix and match and I can just rip it off at the end of the day if I want to. When I finished everything and everything was dry, I then attached it to the bag and I did so gently, carefully because it can pop off, so just be careful if you do this. These pins are obviously not as durable as the others, so just, handle them with care. But it was a very, very quick, easy project. Anyone can do this, and look at how cute it looks. Again, like with the other two pieces, I would like to eventually add more to this. I could see some sort of fun stuffed animal keychain or something like that on this bag. I really like how this turned out. I think it's fun and playful. I like the pops of color and personality, and it calls back to my middle school and high school days when I used to customize and do this sort of thing all the time. But I love pins and patches. I always have. I love incorporating them in my style. I think that they are fun little mementos and keepsakes of your personality in life. And overall, I think this is probably my favorite project of the bunch. So that was all 3 clothing upcycle projects. Let me know which result was your favorite, and I would love to know if you plan on trying out these projects yourselves. Liking, commenting, sharing, all that stuff really helps out the channel, and I appreciate you spending your time on my videos today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!